contour, where you can get all your...
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's me, the Notorious MJH. Happy Friday to y'all. And tonight, we're here with our co-host, Dolly-Miller Brennan, and our guest, Larry Ballard of LibertyCrusade.com and author of Modern Slavery and the Fight for Freedom. And he is here to talk about Washington's hidden agenda and to give everybody some insight on what that's all about and what Washington's hidden agenda is, so that everybody can be aware of this before the election day coming up here in November of 2010. Larry's book, it's available on Amazon.com as well as his website, which I mentioned already is LibertyCrusade.com, along with a lot of background and information. I was very interested in 9/11 stuff, by the way, Larry. And tonight we're going to talk about him, and we just had a brief pre-interview with him, and this sounds pretty interesting. So, Dolly-Miller Brennan, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing real good. I'm hanging in there.
You hanging in there?
I'm hanging in there.
Ready for the weekend?
Ready? Oh, am I ready for the weekend? Yeah.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a weekend in India. So
I'm glad I'm not in India.
I have to explain it every time I say that. In India, with the technology, like when you call Microsoft, you're actually usually calling India. And Indian IT Tech once told me that there's no such thing as a weekend in India. And I thought, what, you guys work 7 days a week? He's like, well, yeah, we do have weekends, though. But it's like, because of the time zones, it's 24 hours, 24 time zones. So wherever you're at in the world, it's always a weekday somewhere if you're in India, but really if you're in anywhere. So, Larry Ballard, how are you doing?
Hello there.
Hello. You're going to fill us in about Washington's hidden agenda. What is Washington's hidden agenda? Sounds Alex Jones.
Well,
you're not going to tell me the sky is falling and blow up my Twitter, are you?
I'm sorry, say again?
I think you're not going to tell me the sky is falling and blow up my Twitter, are you?
No, but I am going to tell you we've got some issues and we need to pay attention. I think a lot of Americans who've been apathetic about politics are waking up. I think they're scratching their heads because their jobs are in jeopardy, because they're maybe behind on their mortgages, and they're all going, well, is the administration incompetent, or is there an agenda? Are they doing something to us on purpose? And in my book, I go back 200
like
years.
That on purpose?
Pardon me?
Why would they do something like that on purpose?
Well, it's a hard question to ask. Well, if it takes too long, stop me. You have to go all the way back to the founding of this country and why we came over here in the first place, to get away from the monarchies in Europe. And what happened is a story I tell in my book. The book is set 30 years in the future. I'm talking to my grandson, and America's collapsed. And I say, Eric, do you remember the time we played Monopoly and you landed on Park Place, and then the next time you landed on Chance, and it said go to Boardwalk, and you bought Park Place, you bought Boardwalk, you bought all the hotels, and you bankrupted? Well, that's what happened. Basically, the colonial empires, especially England, there was a saying, the sun never sets on the English Empire. They basically had the ships, they went around the world, and they colonized, resource-rich countries around the world, basically had slave labor and free resources, and they controlled all the seaports around the world. They literally got a lock on trade, and they became so wealthy that nobody could stand against them. Well, those nations may not be superpowers anymore, but the money that was accumulated during that period of time resides within the Rothschilds and the Morgans and the Rockefellers and key families around the world. And they control the World Bank, and they control the central banks of the United States of America. Basically, our Federal Reserve is a private bank owned by international bankers. And they use their money in order to control us. And they have come out and said, in many, many instances, we are against free enterprise. The resources of the world belong to us, and we're going to control them, and we're going to manage them. And we have a huge population of 7 billion people, which they consider to be too large. And so when we hear redistribution coming out of Obama's mouth all the time, it's from his handlers, the international bankers, who are getting us positioned to be willing to live by a substantially lower standard of living if we allow them to do it to us.
Well, now, you know, Larry, one thing I have found interesting in your book, The Economic Tribulation, is in regard to the mortgage industry. So my question to you is, Obama has specifically stated, refinance your mortgage. We're going to help you refinance it. And it appears that there is a great danger in controlling the mortgages of individuals, particularly if they have a 30-year mortgage, and this is one more way to control the lives of those of us living here in the U.S. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, first let me give you some background. God prepared me to write this book. So in reference to that question, I've been an investor in real estate for 30 years, and I've been a licensed broker for 12 years, so I know what I'm talking about. We have to go back, actually, to the Bush administration, and we have to go back even to the Clinton administration. Clinton oversaw the deregulation of the Glass-Steagall Act, which allowed basically the housing bubble that we have now, because basically it allowed banks and securities to come together, which is what allowed the collateralized debt obligations, which is what collapsed the market. Well, most people don't know that our federal government, basically just like they do with immigration, getting in the rights of the states and denying the states to do what they want, did the same thing with the housing market. The governor of Georgia was an ex-banker. He saw the collapse coming 3 years before it passed an anti-predatory lending law. Washington came down on him like a ton of bricks. Several other governors were in the process of passing anti-lending laws, so we could have prevented this. And Bush came out and put the Trump card down and said that is a right of the Fed, not of the states. And there was a letter sent out by all 50 governors, signed by all of them, wanting to have anti-predatory lending laws, and the federal government of the United States nixed it because they wanted this collapse. And to go further now, to come up into the Obama administration, the people don't understand what happens with your mortgage. If you've got a mortgage and you're like the average American and you move every 5 to 7 years, people don't understand that in the first 5 years, 80% of everything you pay in goes to interest. That's why you get those letters all the time, refinance, 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 because if you fall into that trap, you never, ever, ever, ever own your home. And as a matter of fact, we don't own our homes. We used to have something called AODO ownership, which came from the founding of this country at a point in time which if you bought the property, you owned it for life. Now what happened is in the Depression, we changed over to fee simple, and as far as I'm concerned, we're all renters. If you fell behind on your tax payment by a single year, you owed, say, $6,000, you had a house paid for, you were an elderly person, you got senile and you didn't remember to pay your taxes, you could have a $300,000 house paid for, and the government can sell it at a tax lien and not give you a single solitary penny. They sell it for the tax debt, period. So, yes, it's dangerous. It's very, very dangerous, but it's just one of the ways that they're trying to control us.
Well, this is what I was thinking. This is absolutely one of the ways, and we're looking at taking away the right to own your own home, because you really don't own it. The government owns your home, because if you fall behind on your taxes, you're out on your heels. So we're seeing this is another control mechanism put into place. And also, in regard to what's happening now with the recession, and I'm looking at the correlation to the Great Depression, and I think what you're saying here is that it really wasn't the stock market crash so much by American investors, because in 1929, people were just not investing in stocks and bonds. You didn't have that many people doing it. However, we were paying war reparation payments, as you said, to Britain and France. And in turn, they used that money to pay war loans over to the U.S. Treasury. So we see a stock market crash drying up the wells of American credit and disrupting international cash flows. So are we on that brink now?
Yeah, let me take you back. There was a Congressman McFadden, and he basically, along with Charles Lindbergh, decided that the Fed had purposely caused the Great Depression. What they did is this is very analogous to our housing bubble. They loaned, people could buy stocks with 10% down, buy one margin. We had radio and a lot of new emerging technologies. And you're right, not a lot of American people had stocks. But what happened is They floated a lot of money, so the Rothschilds and the Morgans put the money out there and let people buy on margin. And then, on cue, they called all those margins in, took all the money over to Europe and set while the economy collapsed, came back in and bought everything for 10 cents on the dollar. And I can't remember the guy's last name. His first name was Eugene. But they brought in an ex-head of the Fed to basically be in charge of the reconstruction. And right now, what we have Henry Paulson, who came in under the Bush administration, right when we were in the middle of the stimulus crisis. And guess where he was from? Goldman Sachs. He's one of the wealthiest men in the world, and he put 12 Goldman Sachs people in the Treasury. And the inside joke was, it's Goldman Treasury. So basically, we had a bank running the Treasury of the United States of America, and the difference was that there, in the Great Depression, they interrupted the flow of credit by what they did in the stock market. And in this instance, what they did is, with Bush's assistance and with getting rid of the Glass-Steagall Act, they caused a bubble in the housing market that's done the same thing. And now they come in and manage that by driving us into onerous debt. And it's kind of like I think of my childhood, and we used to have a feisty dog, and that dog could bite people, but he'd never bite me because I fed him. So the old adage is, a dog never bites the hand that feeds him. So what the government's doing with these entitlement programs is they're making more and more and more Americans dependent on the government, hoping that as they ratchet things down, control our wages, control our access to health care, control our access to food and to energy, that we won't stand up and fight because we'll be so dependent on the government. And so the two things that American people have to do is to resist becoming dependent on the government. We need to be as independent as we can. And the second thing is, they're trying to divide and conquer us and set the liberals against the conservatives and set the Democrats against the Republicans and set the lower class against the middle class. And what we have to understand is we all have a common enemy, and it's an elite group of financial bankers who want to control the resources of the world, and they want to have a world government so that they can control all the resources because they believe there's just too much consumption going on, especially in a part of America. So we're a key target. So let me be
quiet. Would you say that they're also trying to control the media?
Pardon me?
Would you say that they're also trying to control the media, or are controlling the media?
Well, it actually goes back over 100 years ago. I can't remember the congressman's name, but a congressman entered into the congressional record the fact that the Rothschilds, that dynasty, had approached the newspaper industry, and what they did is they said, how can we control the thought process of the American public? They did a study, came back, buy these 25 newspapers, put your editors in place, and tell the editorial staff what they can and cannot write, and you will own the minds of the people. And they basically are doing that in every aspect of our life. They're trying to control what we think. And here, I think I've got a little quote if I can find it. I can't right handy, but basically, at the same time, we've got an ex-CIA director who has come out and said that virtually every person of any consequence in the media is under the control of the CIA. So absolutely, they're controlling our churches. They're getting involved, as you were saying a minute ago, into our families. And basically, I called it in the book, it's the first chapter of the book, it's called The Seven Spheres of Influence. And they're basically trying to control everything that we think and everything that we say and everything that we do. But anyway, now we are getting conspiratorial, so redirect me.
Okay, well,
I'm very interested in reading your book. Go ahead, Dolly. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay,
go ahead. I know you're prepared for...
Right. The U.S. transportation system. Is Obama specifically trying to redesign that to optimize trade with China?
Yes. There's some quick. It actually goes again further back than him. It goes back to the Bush administration. So we'll start there. It basically is that they're trying, as they try to form this one world government, they have to do it in steps. And so basically, you've got Europe, which is now basically dissolved from 27 sovereign nations into one conglomerate. And it started with what? A trade agreement. And now we've got the United States, and we started with NAFTA as a trade agreement. And the trade agreements, the rules and regulations of the trade agreements actually supersede our Supreme Court. So they basically can drive us into global governance. And what it's all about, the bigger issue than the highways, is that they want to financially bankrupt the United States because we're the key to them being able to implement a one-world government. So it's all done with debt. They want to collapse us. So basically we go back to the Carter administration. And in the Carter administration, everybody thinks he was a buffoon, but he was just a puppet like the rest. He was just told to play a role that made him look like a fool. He basically took the gauntlet from Nixon, sent a trade envoy over to China, and opened up the doors of trade with China. Shortly after that, we had the World Trade Organization that was formed, and there's 138 major trading nations in the world. All 137 have protections. They have tariffs that limit the amount of goods that can be imported in from China, and they have value-added taxes that give them a rebate back from the government if they export out. The United States is alone the only nation that doesn't do that, and several of our congressmen and senators are on record saying that for the last 50 years, this country has intentionally practiced intentional losing trade. And it really, really went ballistic when we got into the Carter administration, because that's when the World Trade Organization went into place. And what happened is the corporations went abroad, and they would incorporate in multiple third world countries where they could produce things in slave labor conditions, and then they could import back in, take advantage of the tariffs, take advantage of the value-added tax, have no economic disadvantage, but they produced their products without labor unions, with the profit margins were astronomical. But as we've all seen, what happened is we have an absolutely bleeding balance of trade, and we've lost our manufacturing. And without manufacturing and with an imbalance of trade, it's only a matter of time till the patient bleeds out. We're the patient, the United States of America. So what we went from was 200-year-old country that in the Carter administration had a $700 billion total national debt. National debt smaller than our stimulus package. And now we're at $13 trillion. And if you count unfunded entitlement programs, we're at roughly $17 trillion debt.
Actually, that was going to be my next question. You've already explained. Is the U.S. the only major industrialized nation with no trade protection? And in the Carter administration, I was doing some grad work at the time, and one of my thesis was that Jimmy Carter and Zbigniew Brzezinski were threats to national security. And my professor is also my mentor. He said, that's a little wild, but he said it's true. So, because Zbigniew Brzezinski at that time I had mapped out the arc of instability. And you need to control the arc of instability. And this was under Carter. And, of course, there we have Kuwait in that arc going that way over India. And if you control the arc of instability, Brzezinski says you can control the world. He says every now and then you need a little war to ratchet up support for your administration. Make sure it's a little war you can win. So I was very interested in what you said in regard to that era.
Well, I'll go back to him, and I'll give you a little bit of his pedigree. He was, as you probably know from what you just said, he's the Secretary of State to Carter, but he was also the security advisor to 5 presidents. And one of the major chapters in my book, and it's really espoused on heavily on the website, is that the United States of America is called a nation that was forged on war. And it's very difficult for the American public to understand, but virtually every war that we've gotten into, from World War I to World War II, the Vietnam War, and even 9/11, were all false flag events that were perpetrated so that the Federal Reserve could get millions and millions and billions of dollars of interest from us because of the debt that incurs when we go into a war. Arms manufacturers and the Rockefellers could make a fortune. Go to my website. There's evidence there that'll just absolutely shock you. But that's really not related to this election, and I think we need to keep it on a topic that tells people what they could do coming up with the election.
Now, should we be concerned about Obama, as I see him, against manipulating the sale of U.S. infrastructure? Should we be concerned about that?
Oh yeah. Do you know who the Carlyle Group is?
Yes, I've heard of it.
All right. Well, they're involved with the Carlyle Group. Let's go back. Here we have to go back to Reagan. Presidents use their power in very usurpative ways. Little meek, mild, Ronald Reagan gets out of the presidency, and he forms the Carlyle Group. And at that time, what it was a high-ranking military officer that co-founded. I can't remember his name, but they basically went around the world to potentates all over the world and dictators, and arranged arms deals with the U.S. government. So, because we're the largest arms dealer in the world, most people don't realize that. Well, it morphed into an international trading organization. And the Carlyle Group now is huge, and the Bushes are in with the Bin Ladens. I mean, it's very complicated. I can't do it in this little time frame. And in with Carlyle in very, very big ways. And so there's.
So they've been in business. Those two families were in business together for years.
Yes.
They're also tied in with the Hinkleys.
That I don't know about. That's a new one.
Yeah, the Bushes and the Hinkleys had dinner the night. They all had dinner the night before. What's his name? Hinckley, but John Hinckley. The night before Hinckley shot Reagan. The Bushes and the Hinkleys had dinner that night before that.
Don't get me started on the Bushes. I might ask here. I'll go back. I will take a little diversion on that. Goering. We have a lot of similarities between what happened in Nazi Germany and Goering. He was basically Hitler's right-hand man, for those of you who don't know. He said, I don't care who votes. He says, all I really care about is who counts the votes. And with that little pundit, I think of, gee, I wonder what happened in Florida when Bush ran. Did we really elect him, or was he basically put into power? And here, I'll give you a little tidbit off the base. This will entice people maybe to go to my website and check it out. But 9/11.
Tell them what your website is. It's libertycrusade.com.
Libertycrusade.com. And if you go there, you'll find out something that to me is just absolutely mind-boggling. What I'm about to tell you was never investigated. You got Dulles Airport, where all the planes flew out of. You got the World Trade Center. Did you know that Bush's younger brother, Marvin Bush, owned the security company that did the security for the Trade Center, and it was shut down for the entire 3-day weekend over the holiday just before, and he had the security for Dulles, and nobody thought that was important enough to investigate it. I mean, I could do a whole show on just the Bushes, so don't get me going.
You're welcome to come back next week.
Well, when we get into energy, notice one thing in your book I find very interesting. If President Obama is concerned about emissions that he claims, what is this about race cars that are running on compressed air?
Well, I got a lot on that. Basically, it's not cap and trade, it's cap and tax. And maybe that's something we should get into. They control our wages. So let's just go down a list here of ways that they are controlling, and I'll add in enslaving the American people. Basically, the dollar is being devalued. Our national debt is going through the roof, which basically enriches the Federal Reserve. Our taxes are going up, and so what's happening is people are under increasing financial pressure, the kind of pressure they've never been in their lives. And the whole thing with Gore on global warming is a hoax. The global warming, again, you have to go to my website, do some reading, or go to the book and do some reading, but it's more likely, according to scientists, not from carbon monoxide, but from the sun. We happen to be going through a cycle where there's maximal sunspots, and it's about a 20-year-long cycle. And why the scientists say it's not from carbon monoxide is because it's not just the globe, the Earth, that's affected, but all the planets in our solar system are having these same kinds of effects. And so they're saying it's a globalized issue, a solar-wide issue, and it's got to do with the sun. But they want to capitalize on it because they want to control our access to literally everything. So I call it cap and tax. And we could have free and abundant energies, but basically, I don't know if you've ever heard of Tesla, but Tesla was blackballed by J.D. Morgan because he came up with something that approached free energy in 1901, And when J.P. Morgan figured out what he had, he blackballed him and drove him out of industry and basically said, we cannot have free, cheap energy. And so basically, if you look at the government of the United States, we've become an energy czar. We're all about oil. We're 4% of the world's population. We consume more oil than any other nation in the world. And that, folks, if you'll read my book and go to the website, I think you'll understand absolutely. We are in the Middle East for the oil. There was something called, now I'm getting conspiratorial again, but Operation Northwoods. They're declassified documents, so I'm not talking conspiracy here. They're on my website, and basically we wanted to get into a war with Cuba, and so we were willing to bomb American planes with American citizens on them in order to create an excuse or sink a ship or whatever. Kennedy got wind of it and nixed it. Well, when Johnson got in, we had the 6-Day War, and what Johnson did, and it's absolutely documented by declassified documents, is he had the USS Liberty attacked, and the commander of the 6th Fleet had sent out airplanes to defend it. Johnson called in and said, withdraw those goddamn airplanes. I want that ship going to the bottom. And what they wanted to do was then blame it on Egypt, and they wanted to get us into the Middle East so we could occupy. Now, what happened in 9/11? Did you know that a month before 9/11, Rumsfeld gave a paper, and this is the documentation's on my website, gave a paper to Cheney, and Cheney removed, for the first time in the history of this country, a general from control of NORAD. And on 9/11, Cheney was sitting in the bunker controlling NORAD, and we wonder why our planes didn't take off for 80 minutes. And most people don't realize that the Pentagon is the most highly fortified building in the United States of America with 5 missile batteries. Not one missile battery fired, not one plane took off. Osama bin Laden could not have done that from a cave halfway around the world. That's a stand-down order from our government.
Well, he didn't run into the cave until after we started chasing him. But Cheney, he owned a company that got all the contracts to rebuild Iraq. I can't remember the name of it. I'm trying to look it up now.
Halliburton. Throughout my book, I have I have probably 300 quotes. I use 2 kinds of quotes in my book. I use quotes from people in the Trilateral Commission of the CFR who are listed in the book, where it's enough to tell us what their agendas are and damn themselves. And then I use quotes from American patriots who are warning us of what they're trying to do. And then I also go through pedigrees, and I probably got 100 top U.S. officials listed in the book, where it tells, all right, here he is, he's vice president. Oh, guess what? He was also CEO of Halliburton. And we go to, here's an interesting one. We've got Henry Paulson. Well, Henry Paulson came just days before he became Secretary of Treasury from Goldman Sachs. And so I go through and I just give the pedigree so that you can see the vested interest, the special interest groups that are being represented to the detriment of the American public, which is why what we have to do is we voted Obama in with such a landslide because we were voting against the Bush. We got some more lies and we were in worse position than we were in before. So what we have to recognize is the apple barrel is rotten. And what we have to do is we have to vote out the incumbents so that we can get new people in. And in the book, there's 40 pages dedicated to a simple, common-sense plan for how we take this nation back. But it starts with us stop fighting amongst ourselves, understanding what's going on so that we have a plan and execute that plan. And the first thing in that plan is that what we have to do is we have to get election reform. We can't have any more lifetime congressmen and senators, 2-term limits. We have to get rid of the lobbyists. And if we can get control at that level, then we can move on the banking industry after that, and we can go on. And in the book, I'm not an economist, but I'll tell you where the common sense is coming from. It's coming from an in-depth knowledge of history, particularly U.S. history, and it's coming from something that most Americans, unfortunately, have never even heard of, and that is the American economic system, which was a unique economic system that we put in place around the time of the Civil War under Lincoln that over about a 50-year period resulted in the United States becoming the most powerful economic force in the world. Well, ever since then, all these administrations have undone it. And all we have to do, it's very simple. We don't need 2,000-page legislation. We just go back and systematically, by knowing our history, replace what was taken out that we knew worked. So they're common sense solutions that every American will be able to understand when they go to the book and they read it.
Okay,
and all we have to do is just read.
Does it look to you like that Obama is taking us following his father's policy? His father, remember his book, Dreams of My Father, didn't say dreams from my father or dreams of my father. They were his dreams passed down from his father. And his father seemed to be in this leveling. You must level every nation on the earth so that they're all equal. So do we see Obama as taking a slide into communism, as taking a slide into a leveling off of a one world, and possibly looking at maybe the last presidency, but instead of a president, having an international representative for the United States with more power?
Well, boy, that's a complicated question. We need another hour just to answer
Leave it
that
to Dolly. The Barbara Walters of VTR over here. If anybody knows about the Reichstag, then we can follow that chain of thought for a second. We're following Adolf Hitler's agenda step by step by step.
Thank you for saying
Adolf Hitler burnt down the German Parliament, the Reichstag. What did he do after that? He passed the Enabling Act. So we basically attack the Pentagon, the World Trade Center, and folks, in my book, if you'll go there, I think you might just walk away concluding that if that last plane had hit the White House, that this was actually a coup attempt, because Condoleezza Rice and Cheney were whisked away into an underground bunker, and all the rest of our legislators were left exposed, sitting in the White House. Were not evacuated, and if that plane had hit when it was supposed to hit and where it was supposed to hit, we would have lost our entire government, and basically we would have been in a situation where a national emergency was declared. And in that instance, the President of the United States has literal dictatorial rights for a period of 6 months. You don't come out from that. So that's very similar to what happened in Germany. They passed the Enabling Act. We passed the Patriot Act. Hitler went in and attacked Czechoslovakia and then Poland, and we went over and we attacked Iran and Iraq. And in the process, they screamed Homeland Security, Homeland Security. In reality, it was them themselves that had done it, and they took away the rights of the German people until finally the Constitution was usurped, and it became a dictatorship. And through the Patriot Act, which Obama was supposed to not sign once it expired, and through several other pieces of even more sinister legislation that have been passed, we're losing our Constitution and we're losing our freedoms, and we're moving into a position where all they have to do, according to Henry Kissinger, is create the right crisis of the right magnitude, and they can move this into a one-world government. And that's where Obama is trying to take it. He's trying to control our wages, our access to energy. The healthcare thing was all about controlling 1/6 of the U.S. economic system and controlling our access to medicine. He's gone in and slipped in a little piece of legislation into another bill on water rights. It used to be that the federal government controlled navigable rivers, but now if the president deems necessary in an emergency, he can take control of all water. And basically, they're getting control of all the things that are essential for life. And as they do that, we become more and more and more enslaved. And so we have to recognize that, and we have to stand up, and we have to go to the polls, and we have to vote out the Republicans and the Democrats, and we have to get. I mean, I think you're right, Dolly. If we're not careful, if we put Obama back into office again, he may well be the last president this country ever sees. And with that, I'll pause and let you redirect me.
Stick rock cocaine up my butt. Like you live that down. That was another show.
That's a clip from a previous
I'm not going to touch that one. I'll let you regroup and ask me a different question.
That's a whole other story. Here, I'm concerned with also, the control of offshore drilling, and concerned with allowing other countries to go in and control our offshore drilling.
Well,
is that a concern?
I have a different concern. It's a bigger issue. It's about control of oil. I mean, basically, we're over in the Middle East right now because there's did you ever hear of PMAC, the Project for the New Century? All right, they wanted to have regime change. Well, they got it out of 9/11. So we toppled Saddam, and there's an excellent book out called The Economic Hitman, who was a man who worked as a surrogate for the CIA, who over his lifetime tells how the United States government would go into third world countries, and what they would do is through the World Bank and the U.S. aid organization, they would loan billions of dollars to third world countries to build infrastructure with the intent, which is what they're doing to us right now, to intentionally bankrupt them. And when they did, their natural resources were collateral, and so countries like Brazil, one of the richest countries in the world, has defaulted on their loans to the World Bank 3 different times, and they end up owning those resources. And so it's about controlling global resources. And the big kicker within this government think tank is that they've identified that within the next approximately 10 years, the U.S. demand for oil is going to exceed supply. Therefore, it became absolutely imperative that we get a foothold into the Middle East. And for those of you who are biblical, that plays right into the end times where there'll be a third world war, and that third world war will be over oil. So we're sitting there as a cork, sitting in the Middle East, and we're basically there to block access of oil to China and to control the Middle East, and that's why we're there. And I know I can't convince anybody of that on this show, but if you get the book and you go to the website, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of facts that I believe will convince you. So it's all about oil, because oil is power.
Pardon me? Can you tell us a little about the Trans-Texas Corridor and how Red China is involved in that?
Yeah, we got off the track there. I'm sorry. So basically that has to do with the trade issue then, where they're trying to siphon our money off by trade. It's what they call the free trade system, which was originally initiated by England and now has been perpetrated on us by China through the U.S. government, allowing it to happen by not having tariffs. So basically what they're doing is they've already cut the manufacturing cost. It's basically slave labor. I've been over to Europe, over to China, and I've been in the factories and I've seen what goes on over there. And so now they want to cut down every cost component they can. So the last one that's left is shipping. So what they're doing is they're building deep water ports in Mexico to bring super tankers in so they can bring massive shiploads of containers in, get the transportation costs down so that they can drive more American businesses out of business. And then they're going to connect a number of different existing highways together to create a corridor of highways running up through Mexico, through the United States, up into Canada. And they'll flood the United States with ever-increasing larger and larger amounts of cheap goods from China. And in the process, they've changed the laws, and this is where Carlisle comes back in again. It used to be that the federal government could take property, the right of eminent domain, for the public good. Well, now, under the Bush administration, in order to do a quid pro quo with the Carlisle group, he's changed the law. And now they are forcing Texans in particular, you know how feisty the Texans are, to sell their land in order to put this ITT-35 Texas transcontinental highway through. And they're saying basically that they're forcing them to sell their land to international investors. So it's international bankers who are buying this land, and American citizens are being forced to sell, not for the good of the American public, but to fatten the coffers of international bankers. And I don't know what else you want me to say on it, but okay, it's basically to siphon our money out.
What I wanted to hear, and it brought up another question in regard to my concern about Obama being the last president if we elect him again. We told everybody what was going to happen before he was elected. Nobody listened, and now we're all having to pay for it. Now,
and do you know 98% of black people are still supporting Obama?
Pardon me?
Say again?
98% of black people are still, his approval rating, 98% of black people are still approve of him, or still supporting him.
I
Do you have any
personally
idea
think that's
why?
a
I
racist
do.
situation. I think it's, I think he's done more to divide the races than any president we've ever had.
Oh.
My concern is with the United Nations entering into the equation on Arizona and other nations allowed to say they're going to sue Arizona. Hello, are we the only nation in the world that today illegal immigrants were campaigning in Washington State, saying, going to people's houses, we want you to vote for people that will allow illegal immigration, or that will allow us to come forward. I mean, are we the only nation in the world that allows other illegal immigrants to come in? It seems as if you're a U.S.-born citizen, you have no rights under Obama, but if you're an illegal alien, then your rights are there. And again, the United Nations trying to carry a suit out against the state of Arizona. Should we be concerned about that?
Yeah, and actually I'm going to answer both of your questions with one, because basically Mike had a comment there too that fits in. What you have to do is I listen to talk shows and I listen to people and I listen to politicians, and they talk always about a single point and they debate that point. You can't do that. What you have to do is you have to take the broad view, and you have to understand the dynamic of the issue and how it relates to other components. So I'm going to take your two issues, tie them together, and actually string them with some other things, and I think you'll see where we're coming from. Legal immigration is just a furtherance of the attempt to bankrupt us. Basically what they do is they allow the immigrants to come in. The immigrants, they basically work for cash in many instances. They're not paying money into the Social Security program, or they're not paying us taxes, and they're outbirthing us as well as the Muslims. The Caucasians basically are at about 1.6 in terms of birth rates, and we no longer have a family of 4. But you've got the Mexicans that are having 4 and 5 kids, and the Islamics that are having 6 and 7 kids, and most of those kids are on social welfare. So basically, it becomes an issue of entitlements, and
Mike,
that goes
you need
back
to get married and have babies.
And that goes back to the race issue, because here's what's happened. It goes back to trying to make us dependent, and here's where people don't look far enough ahead to see what's going on. Every country, every country that ever had a collapse, that went through a major depression and collapsed, they had entitlement programs where people were getting aid to dependent children, they were getting food stamps, they were getting all these entitlement programs, and basically that was buying votes. So that's what's happening with the black vote. But what they don't understand is, once everything collapses, the very first thing they do in every single solitary instance is they cut the entitlement programs. They go to hardship cases and say we can't afford those anymore. And so they're pitting the middle class against the lower socioeconomic class. And what we have to really stop and understand is, I don't have this quote in front of me, so I'm going to have to bear with me, but there was a leaked memo that came out from, I'm not sure if it was Citicorp or Bank of America. I'll have to get it and refresh this at some point in time. But basically what they said is, we now, the banking institutions, have become the new aristocracy, and the banks we have more money amassed than the 95% of the population that sits under us. And so here's what America needs to understand. We got to attack the banking system. We had a judicial decision that was made years and years ago, and because of that, what happened is we had anti-predatory lending laws, or anti-usury laws, in all across the country, but there were 6 states that didn't have them. So all the banks ran out to those 6 states, and we went from interest rates that were capped out at 7, 8, 9% to interest rates that are 30 and 40%. We have to stop that kind of stuff. And so this issue
That's a loan shark
is huge. And yes, it's huge and it's pervasive, and it's more involved than you think. So basically they're trying to collapse us with immigration and all the entitlement programs and the blacks against the whites. But it's even more pervasive than that. Going back to the new American millennium and what their objectives were, PMAC it's called. One of the things they wanted to do is they wanted to be able to control. I've just lost my thought here. You have to bear with me. They wanted the U.S. to be a supreme military power, and so I need to take you back to the Vietnam War. Hundreds of thousands of Americans were in the streets protesting. Why? because our children were drafted and they were dying in a war we didn't believe in. So the American government, if anything, is astute and learns. So what's this war? This war is an all-volunteer army. What most people don't recognize is that for every American soldier over there, we have two Blackwater people or from some other organization, two basically hired soldiers. And so our people aren't out protesting in the streets, but it's a war of occupation. Now, they want to get even more powerful because they want to control the Middle East and control the oil. So here's where immigration comes in in a usurpative way that most people would never even imagine. They just got the dream package that they're trying to get passed, which basically says that if you're the child of an illegal alien who's coming to this country from Mexico, or anywhere else for that matter, if you will but join the military, you will be granted U.S. citizenship. And so what they're doing is they're using that to create an army. So we're going to go to an army that is capable of being much, much bigger than it is because they're going to woo the Hispanics in order to give them citizenship. And so this spider has a lot of legs and a lot of tentacles, and it goes in a lot of different directions.
Well, they did the same thing with Puerto Rico and the Philippines. Actually, just the Philippines too, but that's actually part of the United States now somehow, and so is Puerto Rico. But yeah, if you join the military, you're automatically a citizen, and so is your family.
Yeah.
Well, my parents called Roosevelt the Great Destroyer. They did not like FDR. My daddy said he's destroying this country. That's what Daddy said at the time. He's creating a dependent society. Now, what would you think about that?
Well, I have a chapter in my book, two chapters actually. Well, actually, it's interspersed in the book. One's called the Trail of Blood, and the other's called Rogues Gallery. And basically, anybody who stood up against the powers that we've been talking about was one way or another assassinated. And I go through all of the assassinations. So you got McFadden, who was the congressman who pointed the finger at the Fed, and he was assassinated. You got Kennedy, and people just really don't understand what happened with Kennedy. It was the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he didn't do what the powers above wanted to do in terms of that war. They wanted to actually to have a war, and he was bound and determined there wasn't going to be one, and he had passed an executive order 11900, I think it was, and he was about to embark on dismantling the Federal Reserve of the United States of America and putting the issuance of currency back in the hands of the U.S. Treasury Department, and those two things simply weren't allowed, and he was killed. So there's several people in the book that I talk about that were assassinated because they stood against these. And then you've got people who were bought, and they basically were made men. They were brought in to follow the agenda of the financial elite that controlled them as puppets. And I go through a whole. It starts
such as Roosevelt.
Starts with Wilson. Wilson was put in by a group of bankers, and he promised the American people during his campaign that he would not give us a central bank. Within 13 months after coming into office, we had the central bank, and that's where the demise of our currency began, and because they could then control interest rates, they could control the money supply, and with that, they could control the boom-bust cycles. And every time they have a bust cycle, they come in and they buy assets for pennies on the dollar. And then when you get into Roosevelt, most American people, because of the rewriting of the history books, which is another way in which they control us, but my books go way back. I'm not a young kid, and I read books that go back before they rewrote them. And he was horrible. He was absolutely horrible. He was next to a dictator. And when he ended his third term, they basically passed legislation so that they could never have anybody come in and be in office as long as he was ever again, because they saw that we were basically on the brink of a dictatorship. I mean, that's another show in and of itself. But he basically started a lot of the entitlement programs that we have now that have hurt us, and there were some horrible things he did. So he's one of the ones that's in my rogues gallery.
One of your quotes that your quote, one that you've included that I really like, is Mao Zedong. Passivity is fatal to us. Our goal is to make the enemy passive. And it seems to me that the Obama administration is trying to make everyone passive.
Oh, Obama's an interesting animal. This is not in my book because it's something that I've really just started researching recently. So I'll tell you just a little bit about it. But we have really two threats coming against the United States. We have the bigger threat of the financial elite, but we also have a Muslim threat, and the Muslims have long been against the Christians and been committed to taking over the world. And how they're doing it is very interesting. I don't have statistics on top of my head, but they're basically doing it by immigrating into Christian nations and then having massive numbers of kids, 6, 8, 10, 12 kids. And eventually, if you look over in Europe, they become a voting majority, and they push in gradually Sharia law. Well, if you look at Obama, it's very complicated. He's the first president we've ever had whose citizenship has been questioned, and yet he was not forced to deliver a birth certificate. So we have questions just like we did with Bush really elected because of the Florida thing. Well, is Obama really a U.S. citizen? And then I found this just a few nights ago when I was doing some research, and it shocked me. There was a quote in the Quran. You know, you can go to the Bible and you can get quotes where you can go online and do the same thing in the Quran. And it basically, if I can remember this, it basically says that the end shall not come until the sun rises in the west. Okay? Obama sends out mixed signals. Obama has an agenda where he wants to be far more than just the President of the United States. As this world government comes together, he envisions himself playing a very key role in that. So I want you to think back to when he was standing on the platform and he was his political candidate, and you saw his logo behind him. Here's what it is. It's a circle with the American flag waving at the bottom.
Absolutely.
And a sun rising over top of it. See, he swears to the American people he is not a Muslim, but to any Muslim who knows the Quran, he is fulfilling one of the key prophecies of the Quran. The end shall not come until the sun rises over the west, and that is his logo. I mean, he is a very complicated man, but he is not a friend of the United States of America, nor is he a friend of the
I'm very familiar with that symbol because every time somebody does something stupid in front of me in traffic, I look up and they got an Obama sticker on their car, and yeah, that symbol's on there.
Mike, you're a great guy. You need to go out here and beat the other factors, the cultures. You know, people like you need to go out here and get married and have babies. That's what a lead balloon.
Where do you want to take me next?
Pardon?
Where do you want to take me next?
Well,
we got about 5 minutes left, so let's recap your website and where people can get your book, which is libertycrusade.com and of course Amazon.com. And I've got a link to it on my site, so if people are looking at the Blog Talk Radio or my blog, they can link onto your site, the libertycrusade.com, or just directly to Amazon and order your book through there. That's important. We'll make sure everybody knows where to find out more about you and where to get your book. And if you just want to take a few minutes, and you're definitely welcome to come back next week and weeks after if you'd like to discuss some more stuff with us. Oh, great. We'd love to have you. This has been very interesting. Yeah, if there's anything you'd like to add before. Oh, by the way, we're going to play some music in a few minutes. You don't have to leave. That's just closing. We do a live stream, which is what we're doing right now. I meant to go in this with you before we started, but we're on live stream right now, and that's going to be recorded into a podcast. Now, after the live stream stops, we're still being recorded for podcast. So if you want to hang out a couple more minutes after we play the closing music and stuff like that, you can. You don't have to hang up. But while we're still live, if you want to take a few minutes and just go over your projects and where to find them at, and just wherever you want to go, you can go.
Well, I would encourage people to come to the website. Unfortunately, my objective was to write this book. I've written the second book, and I'm now writing the third book that's going to deal with another way in which we're being controlled, which has to do with something called the Codex, which is basically how they're controlling food and genetic engineering and all of that. But the website's it's up and coming. It's not completely finished, but there's a lot on there, and there's going to be a lot more in the coming weeks. I'm really trying to educate. I mean, that's the key. We cannot be empowered if we're not educated. So please get my book. Please go to the website. Please educate yourself. Please don't be politically asleep. Please wake up and go out and vote. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Basically, we got to get the incumbents out of both parties, and we've got to get people in who are willing to listen to the American people and listen to what we want, not the special interest groups. And it's going to take us standing up and becoming more involved than we've ever been in our lives, because I truly believe this. I'm going to say something that's going to sound a little strange, but I'm a very, very spiritual guy. And I'm going to share something at the end of this show that may shock some people. 30 years ago, I have occasionally had prophetic dreams. I had a prophetic dream 30 years ago that this was what God called me for. And 2 weeks after that, I'm standing in a hotel. A man comes up and taps me on the shoulder, because God always confirms things. Out of the clear blue sky, I'm checking out at a Holiday Inn, and he said, God told me to tell you he's going to make you a millionaire, that you're going to lose everything that you had, or most of it, so that he can teach you and refine you and put you in the furnace. And then there's going to become a time when the United States of America is going to be in the biggest crisis it's ever been in. And he's not going to use people in power. He's not going to use people in Washington. He's going to pull people from nowhere and bring them out. And you're going to be one of those people. So I'm a voice of the people. If you go to my website, I don't know if my web guy's got it up right yet, but there's a profile on me, and you'll see that everything that's happened in my life over the last 30 years has been to prepare me. I've been in healthcare, so I understand the Obamacare. I've been in real estate, so I understand that. I've got 2 U.S. patents that took me to China, so I understand the sweatshops. I was involved in 5 acquisitions and mergers, so I understand how they've taken us apart. And this is a passion. It's not just about making money for me. It's about creating a world where my children can live in some kind of dignity, and where their children can live in dignity. And so I just really would plead for people to just get involved, get educated. You're not going to be able to do anything to help this nation if you don't get educated. And in the book, it's a very simple plan that I lay out step by step by step everything we need to do in order to reclaim this country. And we can do it if we'll stand up and fight, if we'll stand up for our rights.
Very well put, sir. Hey, I really appreciate you being here. This has been Larry Ballard, everybody, author of the book Modern Slavery and the Fight for Freedom, which is available on Amazon.com, and his website, LibertyCrusade.com. And this is MJH for Dolly-Miller Brennan saying peace, God bless, everybody have a great night, and an even greater day tomorrow.
Mike and Dolly, thank you very much.
I told you, Mike, he was going to be dynamite.
He absolutely was. He absolutely was. Thank you very much. Great job, guys.
Do you guys want me to hang on the line here, or should I hang it up?
Yeah, no, stay on the line. Stay on the line. As soon as we close, we can talk some more.
I got about 15 minutes that I can stay.
As long as my battery here, I probably am on a cell phone. I probably better go plug it in so I don't go dry on you here.
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.
Mike, I'm
okay, yeah, we're in the podcast time. I'm sorry, Larry. Did you say your battery's going dead?
No, I'm good.
Mike, I'm going to send you a link. I'm going to send you a link to Roots Shiva. Roots Shiva is a newspaper I subscribe to, and you can get it online. And I'm just noticing here that from Roots Shiva in Israel came out, this is just, God, it says Islam is not like Christians, which gets me into Avi, a friend of mine, Avi Lipkin from Israel, that says the same thing. And I'm going to click into this and say, she's saying that...
Hey, where are you pulling that up? Have you guys heard about the new Euro card they're coming out with in Europe?
Euro card? No, I haven't.
No, I heard the Euro dollar, but... And I've heard
apparently they're coming out with a Euro card, and I'm not sure if it's going to replace dollars, like bills, or like where it's mandatory, you can only use that card, and they're going to abolish like cash there. But they're definitely coming out with a Euro card, and I'm wondering. Like I looked it up, and there's not much on it. I can find where they're coming out with this Euro card, but I can't find out if it's replacing cash or it's like optional. But it's, you know,
scarier and scarier.
I don't know anything about that, but I can tell you there's a piece of legislation that's on the back burner that luckily our legislators who don't read the bills and don't write the bills at least stop this. There was a piece of legislation that was going to force RFI chips, and basically they tabled it. So for right now, it hasn't been passed, but they're sneaking it in by putting it in passports and in military IDs, and eventually in our driver's licenses. And where all that's going is according to Rockefeller. Basically, if you think about it, and you think about how I talked about how they're controlling us and controlling all of our access to everything, well, they'll go through those mechanisms first, and then eventually they'll get into a regular chip that's inserted in us. And now, if anybody is a dissident, like I might be defined as a dissident for standing up against the government, all you have to do is turn your chip off, and you can't buy and you can't sell. I mean, we're getting biblical now. But you know,
we really are, because I believe when it goes to that microchip that you're talking about, I believe that is the mark of the beast, the 666 they talk about.
Absolutely. I mean, I believe for anybody who's ever read the Bible, it's hard to walk away and not see that the Bible is being fulfilled right now in these times. I mean, it's just absolutely, it's happening every single solitary day. And by the way, Dolly, I want to say to you, you didn't get my information very much in advance, but you really, really, you know, crammed a lot of stuff into your head in a short period of time, and it's just pretty obvious you're a pretty bright and intelligent person.
Well, thank you. I wanted to
really excellent at that. She is really excellent.
I really wanted to see you touch on these things. To see you touch on these things. It almost seems like a mountain that it's impossible to overcome. You know, I had given up politics, and then I decided, wait a minute, I've got children and grandchildren. You got to leave a world to them. And so this is not something I really wanted to do. This was something I felt responsible. I felt obligated to do. I just kind of wanted to pack it all in. I wanted to live an easier life. And you can't do that. If you can, you're leaving the world in much worse than where it came from. Here it
now,
says,
are people hearing our conversation right now?
They will be. Mike will put this on YouTube and other places.
Okay, well, then what you said, Larry. Will what be on?
I was going to make a comment as to where I think all this is heading, but it might be negative, and I didn't want to. If people were hearing it, I didn't want to say it. So,
people aren't hearing it live, but they can hear it later on in the podcast. Like when you go onto the site and download, you can put it on your site for people to download.
Well, here I'll tell you. I'll go ahead and say it. Here's what I think God called me for, and I think He called others. I don't believe that we are going to truly, I don't believe we're going to be successful in stopping this thing from happening. But I think what's happening is that He's going to call His people. He's going to call a group of people to stand up, and He's going to separate the wheat. He's going to separate the chaff. And if you look at the Exodus from Egypt, basically we now have turned from Him, and we're going to have to go through some hard times. But the question is, will it be perpetual slavery, or will it be just a period where we're refined in the fire? And that's where I think we have to stand up. It's not. We've waited way too long for there to be a simple, easy, painless solution to this. But if we don't stand up, then the solution is going to be far, far, far worse. So we've got to fight. I mean, that's all. And I'm not talking violence. I'm very much a non-violent
Well, it might come to that. It might come to that with that's why they're trying to take away the Second Amendment, because the Second Amendment is put in place, or was put in place back in the 1700s, so that if we have to rebel against our government, because in there's a Declaration of Independence where it says if the government no longer works, to tear it down and build another one. I think that's the Bill of Rights. So. Basically, when they're trying to take away that Second Amendment, which is what backs up our First Amendment and all the rest of them, if they take away our guns, we can't fight back. We have no way of fighting back. We have no way of fighting back.
You know what they're doing. You know what they're doing there, don't you? They have not been successful in banning guns, but what they have done is through the Soros organization. Just like the newspapers were bought 100 years ago, Soros money is out buying ammunition. And so if you've got a gun, my son's in the military, and if you want to go out and you want to buy anything more than 2,000 rounds, good luck, you can't get it. So basically, they know they can't control the guns, so what they're doing is they're making ammunition hard to get.
You know,
that's where 2,000 rounds is a lot. I mean, you know, no one person needs an arsenal, and I agree with that. But I'm strong on gun safety and all that stuff. You know, I don't want to see kids getting into their parents' closets and shooting themselves. But I think that everybody at this point in time should buy a gun. If you don't want to carry it, don't. But buy one, because in a couple of years you might not be able to. You know, and I am encouraging that.
Well, that's why I learned to shoot. I can now shoot a Glock 40, the first gun I ever shot in my life. I was out in Arizona with one of my best friends, and she belongs to the Scottsdale Gun Club. And we got in there. I said, "Now tell me, Leanne, what do you think I'd do?" She said, "I thought you'd do fine." I got outside. I said, "Come on, tell me." She said, I thought you'd hit the wall. I didn't even think you could do that. But I could shoot a Glock 40. I thought it was time I needed to learn. You know,
so you learn with a Glock. That's funny.
We need to learn with a Glock, and that's what I learned with. I learned with a Glock 40. What impressed me, there was a man next to me, and he had 2 small children with him, and he was teaching them how to shoot responsibly. And I was impressed with that. But I'm going to have to go pretty soon. I have somebody picking me up for dinner. But we need to try and get the two of you together on with Reverend Rife. Reverend Rife is quite controversial. He's an expert marksman. He knows guns from one end to the other. I've even gone shooting with him, and also being a minister. And some of your ideas that could make one knockout show.
Well, you just let me know. I'll make myself available. I am beginning to get a few phone calls now. It's basically my first day. I just came out, a week ago, but now the phone's beginning to ring, and
I think it's going to be ringing more. I think you have a lot to say, and hopefully everybody's going to stand up and listen to you. And I get a little bit scared. I hope we can take this country back. I think that the United States is the last bastion of freedom in the world, and I hope we can take it back. But France has made some efforts. They've outlawed the burqa, and outlawed some other things, So not that I think it's going to matter over there, but they did try. And
man, they're having a time in France right now. And I don't get what everybody's bitching about, because they're raising retirement 2 years, and everybody's in the uproar. They're raising from 60 to 62, not like 85 years old. They raised it 2 years.
A dependent society is complaining. Yep.
And Pat Robertson, he was talking about it, and his co-host asked him, like, Pat, what do you think the retirement age should be? He's like 70. I mean, come on.
My daddy never retired. Some people don't.
In Europe, they don't usually. I didn't know France had that early of retirement age.
My daddy was a truck driver, and when he couldn't drive anymore because he had broken his back and so many bones in different places, then he got a taxi. He started doing taxis. He just couldn't retire. Well, listen, y'all, I have my friend coming to pick me up, so I'm going to take off.
I'll let you guys go, and if you want to schedule it for another show, you've got my number. Just give me a call.
Okay, well, you and Mike keep on talking if you want, but I'll talk to you later.
All right, take care, darling.
Hey, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Great show.
Okay,
did a great job tonight, Dolly.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
I'll let you go, but if you want to have me back on, I would love it. I will say this. It was a pleasure being interviewed by you guys. I mean, I had an interview about an hour before, and it was a challenge. I mean, I had to, how do I put this? Luckily, I've been a salesman all my life, and I know how to handle myself. But I had a person on the other end that wasn't informed, first of all, and that secondly was, how do I put this? I have a true heart for what I'm saying. And with what you guys were doing, you were allowing the message to get across. What this gentleman was doing was trying to incite conflict, because conflict would help his ratings and his opinion.
Was this broadcast radio or internet radio, the other show you were doing?
It was broadcast radio.
It was broadcast radio.
Yeah,
they do that because they're on time limits. They have producers. They got to get the spots. And what they're really doing is they're trying to get all the stuff out of you to keep the people listening, and then they're just trying to rush through everything, and they want to make everything like shock jocks and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's what
so you're spurious. I asked you about Alex Jones because I just wanted to know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and by the way, I didn't mention it while you and Dolly were basically talking, but when you say go to your website and look at this, I actually found I clicked something and I didn't see before. It has an Alex Jones video on there. I said, oh, I didn't have to ask him about that.
Yeah, I've got some of his stuff. I mean, I think that in a lot of instances he's right on. But as I look at Alex Jones and I watch him with his megaphone go to the Federal Reserve, and I listen to some of the things he says, he reminds me of Limbo. And I think that well, here I gotta here, this will kind of put it in perspective. I was flabbergasted at something that happened today.
He even got banned from YouTube for a while. They suspended one of his accounts. I mean, the guy just
did he? I don't think America needs that. What I think America needs is somebody who is sincere in what they're saying, and if they'll listen to that person long enough, they can start to see. Because basically, as I've talked to people, when I start to talk about this kind of a subject, they don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe that our government is doing anything intentionally to harm us. There's a natural built-in resistance to it. And so you have to have some time to basically take people down a path. And if you're constantly trying to shock them, you'll never get them to stay with you long enough to become educated. So I really have a goal to help people, not to shock people. There's a big difference. And I think as much as Alex Jones has some facts, he's an awful lot about shock, and I just disagree with that wholeheartedly.
I don't think that's what he like sets out to do. Like, hey, let me create this shock factor and everybody will pay attention to me. I don't think that's what he does. I just think that's how he is. And
yeah. Oh, he's nothing like Limbo. I mean, Limbo is way out there. So no, he's kind of in the middle, I guess. You're right about that.
But hey, I mean, he does have a lot of great stuff to say. It's not that. It's just the guy does not be quiet ever. So I mean, that's why I call him Chicken Little. I mean, he's always the sky is falling, and like, dude, just chill out a little bit, and But yeah, he does make a lot of sense, and even if you see, I'm not really a conspiracy serious type, I don't think everything, like, there might be hidden agendas, okay? But the thing is, I don't think everything is a hidden agenda. I think that it's a possibility. Listening to you tonight makes a lot of sense. Things fit together, okay? Do I know for sure? Well, the background you provided as opposed to the foreground that Mr. Jones provides, like, this is what's going to happen. You were talking about, okay, we have these documents, look at the website, and you can see. Judge for yourself. And the other thing is, when you're, this is kind of a long show, an hour long, and very few people will actually listen from beginning to end. They might tune into the middle, and if it's interesting, they'll stick around. If it's something that doesn't interest them, they'll click to something else. If it does interest them, they'll listen to the rest of the show, come back and download the rest of it and hear the beginning. So when you're on this type of show where, like when you're on broadcast, you're on there for maybe 7 or 8 minutes. On here, you're on it for an hour. So when you mention your website, go to my website and look at this. Tell them what it is, because they might not have heard it 5 minutes ago. So don't be shy to plug your website.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I was trying to hint you when we're on live. I was trying to hint around at that. But yeah,
well, I didn't want to. I mean, you had said it several times, and so I didn't want to be out there stealing time from the show, plugging myself when you'd already plugged me. So, but in the future,
it's not just about plugging. It's about giving people. See, this is totally back-asswards of or ass backwards, or however you put it. It's totally back-asswards of broadcast, television, and media and radio, because you have the time to elaborate. And if people really want to get into the subject and listen and call in and ask questions, they will. And we're not going to rush you for time. And like, man, I lost my train of thought now. You're rubbing off on me, dude. but yeah, like somebody who just tuned in. So I mean, it's not like you're trying to plug your website. It's you're giving them the information because they're listening to this. So give them, repeat it so it sticks in their mind. So that if they're driving in the car and they're listening to this on their iPhone, when they get home, they can go to the computer and they'll remember, oh, what was that site? If you only said it one time, they might not remember. But if you said it, it'll say 8 times in a row, like you do in the commercials.
Well, luckily, it's something easy to remember. Liberty Crusade. It's not just a bunch of garbage, gobbledygook. It's something that Liberty Crusade. Okay, I can remember that. But I will say it. I will say it again, and I do hope you do have me back on. And it would be interesting to be opposing a minister because we might just accidentally kind of assist one another.
Okay, well, yeah, the Reverend Rice, he's a really cool dude. He's very outspoken. It's like he was going off about something one night, and Dolly's like, well, do you ever find that people disagree with you about that? He's like, well, yeah, but so what? He's just a really cool dude,
Well, I don't think Dolly is very backward either. I think she can stand up for herself from what I was picking up tonight. Oh, yeah. And I listened to you guys the other night when you were interviewing the senatorial candidate. And,
Cass, yeah. That's the dude. Go ahead. Larry, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, no. No, I was about to mention that dude. I was about to tell you about Cass, but okay, you already heard.
But what about him?
Oh, well, just a lot of things you said tonight, about politics and stuff, about how we got to get the incumbents out of there, and what was it? You mentioned something about I forget how you put it, but like how they produce candidates. And I was like, oh, yeah, this guy's got to meet Cass, because Cass, I mean, he's just like a straight shooter, he's from Texas, and he's just like, look, he'll explain the politics to you if you don't understand, and if you're not interested in politics or because you don't understand it, if you listen to him, he kind of explains it to you what a pompous guy on TV, just like, oh, yeah, well, I voted on this bill because, I want to, protect my community and all this stuff. He actually explains it. And that's what Blog Talk Radio is great for, because you have up to 2 hours, really. We usually, I usually like make the shows an hour, and then like if they run long, we can just talk like we're doing now. Mm-hmm. So you have the extra time, whereas when I schedule for 2 hours and then they run over, you just get cut off. So, 1 hour is good. And if people, if people are still on the line, like have callers, they're not dropped. They're still part of the conversation and everything's just not being streamed live. So, if you'd like to come back on next week, Friday, like if you want to do it every Friday for a couple of weeks or, just whatever, just get with Dolly and, she'll let me know. And like, she does the scheduling, the guests and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I'll call her. I've got her. I think I captured her cell phone number. Is it okay to call her on that?
I'm sure it is.
Okay. All right. I'll call her and I'll just leave her a message and tell her to to look at her schedule and call me, and we'll schedule something. And I'd love to do it again. It was actually quite enjoyable. I mean, I like you said, it's a format in which you get a chance to actually say something, and she was very good about. I mean, I just got her that book. I sent it out overnight, so she hasn't had it more than a day, and in a very short period of time. I mean, she jumped around, but she had done some work. She basically, she had some knowledge, and I could tell it wasn't all coming from that book. She had some personal knowledge of her own to draw from as well.
Yeah, she's got a lot of background herself, and I don't know where she finds all the time to do everything she does, because she's all over Facebook and Twitter all the time.
Now, how did you guys? Articles. You guys are in totally different parts of the country. How do you get together? What's that story?
Oh, internet,
You're the East Coast, right? You're the East Coast,
I'm in Virginia Beach. Yeah, and she's in somewhere in Wisconsin.
Fond du Lac, I believe. I think she said Fond du Lac. So, have you ever met face to face?
No, not at all. We just we're on a website, Ning. It was one of those social networks, and I don't know. It's you know, you had friends and stuff like that, and she's just one that's like kind of followed me every place else I went, and you know, she just hit me up one day. She's like, "Hey, I see you do Blog Talk Radio. Why don't we have this guy Andrew Castanuella on the show? You know, he's running for Senate in Texas. You know, he's a conservative, Reagan Republican. You know, he'd like to be on your show." I was like, "Okay, cool. You know, we'll do it." Because I used to do Blog Talk Radio just like here and there, you know, and now we're trying to do it. We're trying to do it 5 nights a week at 7:00 Eastern, and it's been working like 3 out of 5 nights, you know. But it's hard to do it every night. But we're working on it to where, you know, we can get somebody on the show every night of the week. And you know, if you want to take the Friday slot, you got it. Or you know, if we still got Thursday and Monday open, so whichever one works good for you.
And I'm basically divorced right now, so basically my social life is not real active, so it doesn't make any difference.
Okay,
and I'm committed to this. So,
well, it's actually hard to get people in on Friday, so if you don't mind doing the Friday show, that, you know, because like Friday is the weekend, everybody wants to, you know, hey, it's the weekend, let me go boating, do whatever. So yeah, if you're available on Friday, we can do it then. And you're also, whenever we have a show like Cass or the Reverend Rife or whoever, even if you're just doing the stupid news and stuff like that, you're always welcome to call in. So.
Okay, all right. Matter of fact, I called in the other day, and I've got, let's see what she gave me, Dove.talk, I don't have it in front of me. Anyway, basically,
Blog Talk Radio.
Yeah, it keeps kicking me out. Let me go see what I wrote down, and maybe you can tell me if I wrote something down wrong. Because I had to send her an email and said, send me a link so I know how to actually get in. Because I must have written something down wrong, I think. So let me see what I wrote down when I talked to her on the phone the other day.
It kicks you off the site or it kicks you off the phone?
No, not the phone. It says I'm not authorized to be on this site. What I wrote down was http://www.gov.talkradio.com. Is that right?
No, I don't know where you got the gov from. It's blogtalkradio.com/MKH.
Okay.
Were you trying to hack into the White House or something? No wonder they told you that.
And that's why. Okay, that's why it didn't work. I heard her wrong. Okay. I don't know where I was when she called, but I was.
And then all the shit you're talking on the radio.
I was doing something and I had to go grab a pistol.
They probably think you're trying to hack into the Pentagon or something. Don't type in .gov anything. I wouldn't type in .gov anything if I were you.
Well, that makes more sense now because it kept saying you're not authorized to be on the site.
I guess
so it must be a real site. It must be. Well, that's
blogtalkradio.com/MJH.
Okay, I got it now.
They're gonna be watching you, fella.
I think that's probably more likely to work than the .gov.
All right, Larry. I really appreciate you being on the show. Huh?
You're welcome. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to go out and grab my stuff and bite to eat here myself. And you take care, and I'll leave Dolly a call. And Mike, I enjoyed talking to you.
Okay, great. Great job on the show, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.
I'll talk to you again. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.